can play around.
How are your puns?
All right, welcome to today's Sapr training. I'm Amy One Fox. I am the Sapr ABA here. I have Mr. Peacock here. If my other Sapr ABAs who are here can stand up, at least have one, two. Okay. Also, Plan, and I have a couple more that are on the way. So. That's our team here for Sapr. Training's going to be a little bit long. We have quite a few videos in it, but it's a scripted training, so just bear with me. Yes.
I got ends that need to get used up real quick. I need 19 bodies to cycle out, step over to that lofts real quick, and then you guys cycle back in. Shields, start. You guys got your stuff in? Because I know your next after her.
19 people need to go get their flu shot ASAP.
Oh, one at a time. One at a time.
Hey, Brand.
I'd rather do this than a flu shot.
All right. So one of the important things here is creating a culture of excellence and making sure that we create a culture that maintains an atmosphere that's free of sexual assault.
Humans themselves aren't, we're not stoked. We don't think in terms of one program or the other. As humans, we want to take care of our sailors specifically in mind, body, and spirit. We really need empathy, and leaders need empathy to take care of your sailors, because it is the right thing to do. Our nation's greatest gift that folks give to us are their sons and daughters that come and they trust us. And we can't violate that trust, and we need to take that very seriously. When we are on a ship, in a squadron, in a submarine, a SEAL platoon, or a sea unit, what we have is our people and the unit cohesion and the connectedness that we have throughout that command. And that connectedness and the folks that we have there, taking care of them, it's not only the right thing to do, it has operational context to it. And because if we have a culture where people aren't heard, if people are assaulting other people, then that breaks down that trust, it breaks down that unit cohesion, and then essentially it breaks down the fibers that hold that unit together, and that unit will break up in some ways, and people will be lost, unplanned losses. We talk about that all the time in the fleet, is unplanned losses.
All right, so our focus is today, the goal, we're going to implement policies, programs, and practices that promote protective factors and reduce risk factors amongst individuals and their relationships and within organizations. Prevent experiences of violence. This is for prevention, right? For response, provide support to those impacted by violence, build community awareness, correct myths and victim blaming, hold perpetrators of interpersonal violence appropriately accountable. For the target audience, this is everyone, right? And groups, and groups at increased risk of experiencing violence as perpetrator and or victim. And for response, those who experience violence and shipmates who have experienced violence. Behavior is the product of interaction between each person and the context. Behavior is influenced by our relationships and physical environment. The socio-ecological model aids in visualizing how connected a sense of belonging and protectiveness can have a positive impact through the interrelated and interdependence of our relationships. Sailors are responsible for developing positive relationships and living out signature behaviors and our core values. The Navy and all commands are responsible to establish a positive command climate with good leadership, which creates an environment to prevent counterproductive and destructive behaviors. Some examples of the goals: responsible alcohol use, healthy coping, emotional intelligence, effective communication, and resilience.
I think that being transparent and being accountable allows a lot of mitigation factors to happen. If you're transparent with the people that work for you, especially in your shop. My time as MPO, I had an Ian3 call me on Virginia Beach Boulevard. He actually just saw me. We passed each other on Virginia Beach Boulevard out one night, and he ends up calling me and saying, "Hey, I lost my friends. I need to get back." And this was early before Uber was around. And I said, "Yeah, no problem. Where are you at? I'll come meet you, and we'll go back together." Being transparent and meaning what you say and being accountable if we're standing at that brief on Friday and I tell you, "Hey, if you need anything, you call me," answer the phone on Saturday when that call happens. Because it spreads throughout the ship, and then you may have someone from a different division reach out to you and say, "Hey, I got your number from, DCPO, whoever. He said I could call you. Can you come get me?" And even if you can't physically get there, you make sure that okay, I'm working to get you a ride. This person's going to show up at this point. Doing things like that. And also, in the wardroom, it was something of, if you see an issue, if you see something, say something. And holding each other accountable. Like, "Hey, we're going out tonight, but I know you got that inspection in the morning. You may need to head back before I do because I don't have anything tomorrow," that type of thing. It instills a lot of trust and connectedness throughout the command, and it allows people to be to depend on each other if they have to, if they get into situations.
All right. We definitely want to help all of our sailors. We want to help everybody, right? But we also understand, we can't avoid all consequences. Things happen. So one of the main things that we need to make sure that we can do is mitigate those situations and make sure that we're watching out for each other. Some of the preventative actions that you can do, right? Mentorship and being an active bystander. I know we've done a lot of these trainings, and one of the things that's always focused on is bystander intervention, right? I know a lot of us know how to do that to an extent, but it's important that when you're in a situation where you see one of these destructive behaviors happening, especially in this case when it comes to sexual assault, that you are able and willing to step up and become that active bystander.
I would say morale was low. If something did happen, that sailor didn't want to say anything because it was just like, what's the purpose of me saying anything? Nothing's going to happen. We had this one instance where it was a junior sailor and she was touched inappropriately and she brought it to me and I was like, don't say something. And if you don't say something, I'm gonna say something because it's not right and that person should be held accountable. And because there really wasn't an open door policy and the command wasn't a great command, she just felt like she wouldn't be heard and no one would take her serious. And it would just be like, oh, you're just complaining to complain, or, you just don't want to do something.
Knowing I have someone to go to at any point about anything. Same thing for people I work with, whether they're our civilian contractors and providers or my shipmates. I work with soldiers on the Army side. And that open door policy allows us to open up on different levels, whether it be professional, whether it be issues that we need to discuss, whether something, an incident happens and we don't know how to go reporting and do stuff our own way. We're able to knock on our LPO, our service chief, it's anybody's door, and come to them with a problem. And they can either help us or they point us in the right direction. They guide us to what they think might be the best decision. And I think that's benefited us all because we've all gone through something. I know personally, I know a lot of people that if that open door policy wasn't there, probably wouldn't be where they are right now in their Navy careers or clinics, anything like that, because of something they've been through that they thought they couldn't tell or they couldn't get help with. And having that open door policy really allows someone to know that they're trusted, they are heard and seen, and they're never gonna be alone for anything.
All right, does anybody know the policy here? Do we have an open door policy? Do you know? We do? All right.
Very verbal, yes.
So yes, we do here. I know for a fact that you can go with things. I'll get a little more into the no wrong door policy later, but that's basically where you can go to chain of command about things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your report will be unrestricted. But again, I'll get into that a little bit later. So when it comes to prevention activities, again, making sure that we implement alcohol policies, decrease the likelihood of overconsumption, implement policies that support early intervention for alcohol treatment. A lot of what we see when it comes to sexual assault, there's other behaviors and things that bleed into this. So when it comes to this, a lot of these trainings are going to cover a lot of the same things: alcohol use and other interpersonal behaviors, things like that. So when it comes to norms, promoting dignity, respect, inclusion, and connectedness to the command climate, making substantial efforts to prevent and stop behavior that's unwelcome or offensive. So again, creating a climate that is unwelcoming to behaviors such as sexual assault and that is welcoming to inclusiveness and looking out for each other.
I think the one thing I keep coming back to, which to me is probably the bottom line on all of this, is that we are all first responders, we are all bystanders, we all need to be involved in assuring that we have a Navy that is free of sexual assault and the whole continuum that leads up to that.
All right, so we're gonna go over this a little bit. What is sexual harassment? Unwanted sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and deliberate or repeated offensive comments or gestures of a sexual nature. Sexual assault is intentional contact, that's intentional sexual contact, characterized by the use of force, threats, intimidation, or abuse of authority, or when the victim does not or cannot consent. Relationship between the two behaviors. Work environments in which rates of sexual harassment are high appear to contribute to service members' risk of sexual assault, right? If you let one continue, the other one tends to follow. Right here, as you can see, harassment and assault, your jokes, your innuendos, unwanted touching, it's gonna be in that middle ground going toward the assault side, right? Inappropriate advances or behaviors, again, that's on the harassment side. But when it goes into threats, blackmail, sexual bribery, that's sexual assault.
If you're questioning it, if you were sitting there saying, is that okay? That looks a little funny, then you should know that is not. And then people, whenever they're so young and they're just getting in, and it's like everybody's doing that in the office, then they think that it's okay, and then they're gonna go somewhere else and be like, well, that's where we did that in my old office. You shouldn't have been doing that in the first place.
Nobody really talked to me too much outside of training, so I didn't have those experiences. No real issues there. Training still the same thing. That environment fire was more about like the conversation.
All right, anybody have any specific examples of what would constitute harassment?
See any hands raised? Can you repeat the question?
Anybody have any specific examples of something that would constitute harassment?
Doesn't necessarily have to be from your past or your personal experience, just an example.
All right. Anything else?
Inappropriate compliments.
Okay. Goes into that unwanted, unasked for. How about sexual assault? All right. And again, that could be one of those borderline behaviors, is how and where you're touching can end up being more toward the harassment side or toward the assault side, depending on the context of the situation. That's not something necessarily that we will decide, but if that does become up to report, that's something that NCIS investigates and decides on that. Good answers on that though. All right, some of the top 5 signals here: sexual harassment, gender discrimination, lack of responsibility and intervention, lack of respect and cohesion, and workplace hostility. These factors right here, these increase the risk of sexual assault. If these are left unchecked, if these are allowed, that's where it leads.
So what can we do for the sailors? Ideally, we want to be to the left of the bank, right? This is all about culture of excellence and who we are as sailors in the United States Navy.
Didn't even touch anything. It just crashed. Yeah, no, it crashed. Y'all laughing, the same thing would happen to you if you were up here. I can fix it. It was open on PowerPoint, the application. This isn't where it was. How did you download it? Was it downloaded?
So what can we do for the sailors? Ideally, we want to be to the left of the bank, right? This is all about culture of excellence and who we are as sailors in the United States Navy. We are truly the best the nation has to offer. And we raise our hands, and swear to lay down our lives for the Constitution of the United States. Now, you can get money for college doing something else, but something drove you internally to walk into the recruiting station and say, hey, I want to do this. It's tough, it's hard, I want to serve my country. So all of us have done that, whether it's through boot camp in Great Lakes or the Academy, ROTC, OCS, but now we're here. And it comes down to respect. We have our core values of honor, courage, and commitment, but it's respect. So let's challenge that shipmate of ours that is maybe using inappropriate words, telling inappropriate jokes, just pushing the boundary. That's not what we do. That's not who we are. And so you challenge that first, and you eliminate the microclimates, and you enable your peers and your shipmates to achieve their own personal and professional goals in a safe environment.
Okay. It stopped playing again, not my fault. Next we're going to talk about some active bystander techniques, intervention techniques. First thing is we're going to be able to notice that something is happening. Then you're going to have to be able to interpret whether the situation requires action. Sometimes it, fizzles out on its own, and you can, be able to interpret that is important. And you're going to be able to take personal responsibility for intervening. So you got to follow through with it and actually, stay with the person the entire time. And then step 4, you're going to decide how to intervene. And then finally, you're going to intervene, step up, and step in.
So I usually interject, especially if it's someone lower ranking. I just kind of like break it. Hey, what's going on? And not to scare them, but I'm just saying, hey, there's certain things we can't do around here. Just normal parental stuff. But also, I would ask on the side, not to embarrass anybody, hey, everything good? I would go chain of command. Definitely, if I'm an assistant LPO, I'll go to my LPO, I will go to my chief and say, hey, I noticed something. I'm not trying to start any trouble, but if I'm wrong for feeling this way, then please let me know so I can correct myself.
With anybody you work with, sometimes you have issues, but working through that was a big effort on our ship and in our division. It was like us against the world kind of a deal, where, I'm gonna protect my sailors, whether they're the same rank or higher or lower, I don't care. That's just how I am. Everybody that I work with means something to me, and so I'm always gonna have their back, and typically they'll reciprocate that and have mine.
All right, so we got to talk about how the DoD actually defines sexual assault. That's going to be intentional sexual contact characterized by the use of force, threats, intimidation, or abuse of authority when the victim does not consent or cannot consent. Again, it's very clear-cut definition of sexual assault. The term includes a broad category of sexual offenses consisting of the following specific Uniform Code of Military Justice offenses: rape, sexual assault, aggravated sexual contact, abusive sexual contact, forcible sodomy, or attempts to commit these offenses, regardless of the age or the sex of the victim.
2017, we're off the coast of Puerto Rico, providing relief to our fellow citizens there following the horrific hurricanes that went through. And the chief selects were providing training inside the chief's mess. And it was on sexual assault prevention and response. And as I was leaning up against the bulkhead, I started to feel an anger grow inside of me. And it was blatantly obvious that these 13 individuals had not read the instructions, had not really inculcated the training, and they were just all over the place. And it's not that play, anger, or firmness that sometimes that you employ as a leader to drive a point home. This was real building rage. And eventually, I erupted. And I stormed out of the chief's mess, and I went back to my office on board the ship, and I sat down, my hands were shaking. And I was like, what is going on here? I never lose control. I'm usually the eye in the middle of the hurricane. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I knew what I had to do. I stood up from behind my desk, I walked back into the chief's mess, and it was dead silent. None of the chiefs had left. None of the chief selects had left. And I said, hey, everybody, training time out, sit down and relax. I was like, I've got to explain to you what just happened. For the first time in my life, I'm going to tell you something that I just admitted to myself. I am a victim of sexual assault before I joined the Navy. have been holding on to that all these years. And when you were providing that training, and it was obvious to me that you had not looked into the books, that you had not really dug into it and owned it as a chief petty officer should, as a petty officer should, you were telling me you didn't care about it. And so I reacted like that, and you all stayed here because I'm the CMC, and you gave me the benefit of the doubt. But what if I was an E1 and I responded like that during your training? You would have written me up. Or worse, I bottled it up, walked across the brow, went ashore, and engaged in destructive behaviors because I couldn't express myself and what I thought of. And so that's a breaking of trust, so that when we do this training, understand, no matter what that training is, whether it's on, suicide prevention, there's people in your division, in your department, within your crew that need that help. And you're telling them with your actions and your words that you genuinely care. If you show up unprepared, sailors have a highly attenuated radar for that, and they're going to pick up that it's just words and you really don't.
All right, next we're going to discuss what consent is, just based upon what the DoD explains it is. Let's see, where is it? The UCMJ defines consent as a freely given agreement to the conduct at issue by a competent person, an expression of lack of consent through words or conduct means there is no consent. Lack of verbal or physical resistance or submission resulting from the use of force, threat of force, or placing another person in fear does not constitute as consent. The current or previous dating, social, or sexual relationship by itself, or the manner of dress of the person involved with the accusation or with the accused in the conduct is at issue shall not constitute consent. A sleeping, unconscious, or incompetent person cannot consent. Does everybody understand what consent means?
Yes.
Wonderful. It's a big component to all of this.
It's something that you can't assume, right?
Exactly.
If you are assuming or you don't know, stop. Just stop.
Consent is a freely given agreement to the conduct at issue by a competent person. An expression of lack of consent through words or conduct means there's no consent. Consent is not given by lack of verbal or physical resistance, submission resulting from the use of force, threat of force, or placing another person in fear, a current or previous dating, social, or sexual relationship, the manner of dress, or a sleeping, unconscious, or incompetent person.
Thanks for repeating me. This is 26, potential effects of sexual assault. So what could happen to somebody who has been sexually assaulted? They could become dissociated. Effects of dissociation, I think is how it's worded. You could present with a sleep disorder, eating disorders, substance abuse, depression, PTSD, could be self-harm, and even possibly suicide.
I was drinking a lot. I was just not okay. And I remember waking up one morning and was like, I can't keep going and I need the resources. And that was what I went to the ER and I told them, this is what happened to me and I need help. And in turn, I met up with the SARC, I met up with everybody, and they have been very helpful. But I can't say that that's how it is for everybody. I'm grateful that I've had the leadership that I have and, the outreach that I've had. But that's just my experience. I don't know. It's not like that for everybody.
Right now we're gonna talk about the team impacts. So it's a direct strike against our Navy culture, the honor, courage, and commitment. and it can damage trust and connections or connectedness between your unit or your shop, which really brings down our teamwork and friendship and how we all are one team, one fight.
In that unit, we were really small, and it took everybody to do everything. So I'm IT, I was doing ET work, maybe some AW work, just a little bit of everything. But when you have those other team members that no longer want to communicate with another team member, or I don't want to be on watch with that person, or so on and so forth, because they said or they made me feel, it definitely hinders the mission, because now you watch bill schedules, things of that nature, smaller debts that we need to go on. Well, we can't pair these people with it. They have the most knowledge, stuff like that.
All right. So there's two types of reporting for sexual assault. You're gonna have restricted and unrestricted. Can anybody tell me the difference between the two? Bosman.
A restricted report can become an unrestricted report, but an unrestricted report cannot become restricted. Caveat to your instruction.
Yes, thank you. So I'm just gonna read out the definition of the restricted report. It is confidential. It goes to the SARC and the Sapr VA. The Sapr victim receives any healthcare treatment in regards to the assault. There is emergency care provided, counseling. There is a safe kit available, which is the sexual assault forensic examination. And the victim, like Fosbitter said, may convert to an unrestricted report at any time. Limitation is you're not able to request an expedited transfer with a restricted report. And onto the unrestricted, it is also confidential. It is also going to go to the SARC and Sapr VA. The victim will also receive healthcare treatment and emergency care, counseling, safe kit as well. But it will initiate an official investigation with NCIS and can request an expedited transfer with it. The limitation is you can't go from unrestricted to restricted. Any questions on that?
All right, so as far as restricted reports, for who can take them, SARC, Sapr VA, or healthcare provider, right? I know a lot of times they mention, people mention chaplains, but chaplains have absolute confidentiality, so they do not do reports. You can confide in them, you can talk about your experiences, and they can refer you to either a SARC or Sapr VA or something like that, but a chaplain does not do reports, and all your communications with the chaplain are going to stay between you and the chaplain, all right? Also, when it comes to your unrestricted, your law enforcement, commanders, SARC, Sapr VA, healthcare personnel, right? These people can do, you can report for unrestricted.
From the point of actually acknowledging what had happened to my husband, I was still very confused. I was still trying to justify it in my head because I didn't want another assault to have happened in my life. And so I called my husband, who was deployed at the time in Korea, and I was like, hey, would you want to, somebody told me that they were assaulted. Would you want to know this while you're on deployment? Should she tell him? And he just straight asked me. And from that point, when I said it happened, that began when I started crying. I woke up the next day and just could not stop imagining putting a blow dryer in my bathtub while my son was sleeping in the other room. My son was not enough to want to keep going. And so I called a friend, because my husband he couldn't do anything, in my mind. Called a friend who came over and immediately called my sister, and everybody came. We made a plan for my son. I was like, I need to go get help. I'm not able to do this anymore. And so I took myself to Naval Portsmouth Hospital, and I went in. I just walked in and I said, I want to kill myself, and I need some help. I need some help really fast. I went and finally decided to make a report, and I decided to do unrestricted. because at this point in my life, I was like, somebody's got to be held to justice. So I made a report. I was connected to a SARC who is very important to me, and she connected me with a Sapr. Ultimately, I really worked well with my SARC. We had a good understanding spiritually, like where I wanted to go, how I wanted to heal, and how I wanted to help other people. Even from that point, it was like it happened, and I was like, I'm going to work through my pain, and we need to find a way to make this stop. She then connected me, obviously in CIS. There was an investigation. I had a JAG officer. He was absolutely phenomenal in dealing with somebody experiencing trauma. It was probably the greatest experience I've had, meeting somebody in that kind of position in the military. So he just connected different parts, would let me know, hey, this is what's going to happen next. How are you feeling? Understood that victim blaming was happening, that all these different emotions were going down, and made sure that I felt comfortable and I knew what was coming every step of the way. So having a JAG officer as a military spouse, I don't think a lot of people know that that is a resource, and that they will fight for you just as much as they would fight for somebody in active duty. So that definitely was a great service to me.
All right, so a little bit about who can receive a disclosure. I'm gonna go back a little bit here because there's been some changes. So, SARC or Sapr VA can receive disclosures and assist victims in signing and filing a Form 2910, right? Which you can elect either restricted or unrestricted on that form. Healthcare personnel, chaplains, legal personnel, the CO, and members of the chain of command can assist victims by facilitating a referral to a SARC or Sapr VA in order to file an official report. At that time, the victim still has a choice to file restricted or unrestricted. So you can report to your chain of command, and you'll still have that choice once they refer you to Sapr VA or to the SARC. The only way where you really don't have a choice is if the victim themselves makes the report directly to law enforcement. Once the victim themselves has directly made that report to law enforcement, then is when it is automatically an unrestricted report. It's important to know disclosures to the CO or chain of command personnel are not considered privileged or confidential communications. They are required to report these instances, right? So if you do disclose to the chain of command, you still have the option to do a restricted report. They still have the obligation to report it, right? You do not have to participate in the investigation. You can continue on with the restricted report, receive services, all of that, but that does not mean the investigation will not continue. All right. Commonly asked question is why a person would choose to file a restricted report if their CO and or chain of command already know, and law enforcement has already went forward with an investigation. Filing a restricted report still grants you increased privacy. So even in unrestricted reports, not everybody knows about this, okay? Law enforcement will know, and only personnel with the need to know within chain of command, basically the CO, is going to know that, all right? Even with an unrestricted report, it is not going to be common knowledge, it's not going to be told to everybody. So that being said, that was kind of the thing about the no wrong door policy. Even if you report to someone who is a mandated reporter, that does not mean that you do not have the option to file restricted at that time. You do not have to participate in investigation, and you can continue on with the restricted report if you so choose. Any questions on that? So up here, SARC is your overall management of awareness, response training, and victim advocacy. Your victim advocates are initial points of contact, normally. Deployed residency counselors, certified clinical counselors assigned to CVN, LHD, or seagoing commands. Victims legal counsel. They provide survivors of sexual assault with dedicated attorney to help understand the investigation and military justice process. So if you do have an unrestricted report, and this is going to a court-martial, or even if it doesn't go to court-martial, you can still talk to victims' legal counsel. They also have confidentiality, and they can kind of guide you through the legal process and how that works for you. They're going to be your advocate showing on the legal side of things. And then medical personnel provide physical and mental medical care for sexual assault victims.
Hey, we can't always get to the left of the bag. You know, there's predators out there. Situations are just going to happen. So now a sexual assault has occurred. A victim has come forward and said, hey, this has happened to me. I need help. So what do we do when we experience a loss in our crew? Whenever a sailor is harmed physically, you know, whether they were crushed by a box, maybe they have a loss in their family, they lost a mom or a dad or something like that, we rally around them. When they come forward and they say, hey, I'm mentally hurting right now, and I'm thinking about harming myself, the entire command rallies around that sailor and puts their arm around him and says, hey, shipmate, come alongside. We're here for you. You are part of us because you raised your hand. With that sexual assault victim, we already have all the programs in place, medical, mental health, the command triad, the chaplain, fleet and family. I mean, it is robust and thick. But where the real help comes from is from the deck plate, from your shipmates and your peers saying, hey, you're one of us, and you're going through something right now, and you are hurting. We're going to rally around you. That's what we can do for that ship.
All right, here's some more resources. Again, Sapr VA Medical, Military One Source. Also, catch program. So with the catch program, that's something to where if you are a victim of sexual assault and you get a rape kit done, they can actually put that into a database to catch serial offenders. Victim Legal Counsel, I've spoken on that already. Your Fleet and Family Support Center have resources as well. Local law enforcement, NCIS, for as far as law enforcement resources. DoD Safe Helpline, another confidential way. The MCIO chaplain, the Rape Crisis Center, residency counselors, and Inspector General. So these are different resources for reporting.
About the catch program, it's essentially the Safe Kit evidence goes into it. You can add a description of the offender. In the event that the person does reoffend and they have a Safe Kit that matches, all this information is stored for, I believe it's 50 years?
Yes.
It is it's stored in a database for 50 years. So if, and most times, sexual assault offenders are repeat offenders, it always helps to go towards, you know, catching the person so they can stop the circle of events.
And that can happen with a restricted or unrestricted. If you do a restricted report and you did a rape kit and you opted into the catch program, they would reach out to you. Should they find the person or should they offend again, reach out to you and ask you, do you want to participate? And that's optional at that point.
How would a victim find their way to us? And I would use the word victim and survivor interchangeably because that's depending on how someone wants to identify themselves. And so the victim can find us through going through chaplain services, they can go to medical, they can go to law enforcement, whether that's local law enforcement or NCIS, they can go to a friend who's aware of the Sapr program, a unit victim advocate or administrative unit victim advocate, civilian victim advocate. So there are multiple pathways that lead them to the SARC. They can also go to their chain of command. All of these folks are aware of Sapr services, and immediately hearing the word sexual assault or, hey, I think this may have happened to me, should triage them to a SARC. So that way we have sites on the program and can disseminate the information according to instructions so that we're making sure we're doing right by the victim or survivor.
Again, this is what medical can provide, the sexual assault forensic examination. So these can be done at Portsmouth, and there's also civilian agencies that can do these. When it comes to Portsmouth, if you're going there with a Sapr VA, you're not gonna sit in the waiting room, they're going to take you directly back. They keep it very confidential and private. So, you also can get counseling for behavioral health, and they offer referral services as well. Military One Source, DoD funded program, it's no cost. There's mandatory reporting requirement for certain things, but again, you can report sexual assault, you can get counseling and that help you there. Just a little more on the CATCH program. We already went over. All right, this is for the Victim Legal Counsel. It's a dedicated attorney for a victim. They make sure that they protect your rights and interests during the case. And it's provided at the Navy's expense, regionally assigned, and again, confidential.
In addition to offering a victim the information and the education about their choices throughout the process, a victim's legal counsel can also be the victim's voice in many different ways. They can speak to other folks in the legal process. They can speak with NCIS. They can accompany a victim to an NCIS interview. They can speak with prosecutors. They can facilitate the victim speaking with prosecutors, because victims have the right to learn about their case and understand their case from the government counsel who are trying their case. They can speak to the defense counsel on behalf of the victim as well. In addition, the victim's legal counsel can speak to the command of the offender who's making a decision about what's going to happen in the case, and the victim's command. But the victim's legal counsel doesn't speak to anyone on behalf of the victim without the victim's express permission to do so. This is a confidential relationship. It's an attorney-client relationship between the victim and his or her attorney.
All right, I'm gonna make one quick correction to the CATCH program. It's actually kept for 10 years. Your 2910, which is the report, whether restricted or unrestricted, that's what's kept for 50 years. For the CATCH program, if you opt in, it's kept for 10 years. And again, that is controlled by the SARC, so should you choose to participate in an investigation, SARC will reach out to you. You could agree or decline. And anytime you want to opt out of the CATCH program, contact the SARC and they can remove you from that. A little bit more for resources on and off base.
I'm a civilian. I've never been military. So yes, I always talk about our military resources. But being mindful that resources are not a one-size-fits-all, right? So where I'm talking about chaplain services, which is a great service. Fleet of Family Support Center has tons of services, right? You can get counseling right there. So we also have our Victim Legal Counsel, one of my favorite resources. And then of course we have medical. So once we're talking about, of course, the military resources, we can't forget the civilian resources, because once again, one size doesn't fit everyone. And where I may want to do the chaplain, I may want to go out in the community and do counseling. So you can use DoD Safe Helpline. They can give them a lot of resources. And you can also tell them about the local rape center, rape crisis centers, and different counseling. And if I do not have the actual resource in front of me, which I have like this huge book, like just tell me what you need and I will go and find it, or at least try to find as close as I can get when we're talking about resources, because resources is really so powerful, right? Because it empowers the victim or the survivor to what they need to get over that bridge that they're trying to. So we want to make sure that we're always talking about resources. And a big thing I always tell my victim advocates, like, okay, yes, we offered these resources at the beginning of the case. Great, when we did the DD 2910. But what about next month? What about the month after? So making sure that we're just touching bases and say, hey, I know you didn't need these resources in December, but I want you to know that they're still available. So it doesn't have a time frame, even though the sexual assault may have occurred 6 months ago or a year ago, you can get resources whenever. You can have that Sapr victim advocacy. You have that SARC. So anytime you need those resources, they're available. It's not a time limit. So that's so important.
All right, more on resources, military investigative organizations, NCIS, ACI, Air Force, local law enforcement, and so on. All right, so these are the resources that can maintain privileged communication but cannot accept or restrict reports. They don't actually accept the report. Again, no 2910, but it's still confidential. Mandatory reporting requirement: if a victim discloses sexual assault to law enforcement or the chain of command, investigation is triggered. Command is or MCIO, sorry. Investigation is triggered. Command is notified. If the victim discloses to commanding officer, the CO has an obligation to report, and then the victim can again choose whether or not to participate. So, a few other terms here: retaliation, form of ostracism, exclusion from social acceptance, include acts like bullying. First line of defense: creating a culture that's intolerant for retaliation. All right, and where you can file a report of retaliation, you can report to your SARC or Sapr VA, DoD Safe Helpline, Inspector General.
When I first came in, and I entered in 1982, sexual harassment, sexual assault, all those words, and I think the actions were there, but we didn't have that clearly defined. And maybe because I was, young deck seaman, that was not like a training or an education I remember receiving. I think the actions were definitely there. I can tell you firsthand that now knowing what I know today, sexual harassment was, happening, and I personally experienced some of that. I didn't know it at the time or what to do. So as the years went on, and we started to hear things about it and get education, and Dakowitz, some of the actions from Dakowitz, it started to become apparent that not only was it not okay, but we were going to do something about it. And so that's when I, realized that I needed to be an active member in the Navy as I moved up. And one of the reasons I became an officer was so that I would be in that position to be able to help.
The command triad, commanding officer is commanding officer, right? And then the XO and the CMC support the commanding officer and forward his or her mission out there across the deck plates. And when you talk about the different programs that support our sailors, sexual assault, functional response, Sapr, we're all in. But how do we know that the wardroom is, the chief's mess, the first class mess, the JEA, the sailors that are out there on the deck plate? It requires constant communication and a lot of active listening. And some of that active listening may appear passive in nature, where you're walking through the P-way and you just stop and you just listen. And you can pick up on the tone and the culture of the command. But also you need to sit down and have real, meaningful conversations with your chief petty officers. And also be open for that feedback, because we're not omnipotent. We're not infallible. And so we need to get mentored back from our fellow chiefs and officers on what we can do to improve. But just challenging them on how they perceive the culture, their role in it, and how they're leading their divisions and departments is really key.
All right, so I've got some of the resources up here. Again, I'm the AVA here at the command. Anybody from my team will answer questions if you have them. So you can always come down to me in QA, but ask Peacock here or any of us. Anybody have any questions? All right, thank you for your time.
Does anybody have any answers?